Jake Morrison was fixing a broken pipe in the cargo bay when the message came through. His old freighter ship Silver Dawn was floating near Jupiter's moons, waiting for clearance to dock at the mining station. Jake had been running cargo between Earth colonies for 15 years now, and he thought he had seen everything. He was wrong about that. The communication panel started beeping with an urgent signal. Tony Rodriguez, his first mate and best friend, called out from the bridge. "Jake, you need to see this right now. It's not from Earth Command." Jake wiped his hands on his work clothes and walked to the front of the ship. Tony was staring at the main screen with his mouth open. The screen showed a symbol that Jake had only seen in textbooks. It was the official seal of the Galactic Council. "This has to be a mistake," Jake said. He had never spoken to an alien before. Most humans never did. The Galactic Council was made up of dozens of alien races who had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Humans had only learned to leave their solar system 50 years ago. The aliens mostly ignored Earth and its colonies. The message began to play. A tall, insect-like creature appeared on the screen. Its body looked like it was made of black metal, and its eyes were huge and round like dinner plates. The creature spoke in a language of clicks and buzzes, but the ship's computer translated the words into English. "Human Morrison of the vessel. Silver Dawn," the alien said. "I am Speaker Zethkalar of the Galactic Council. You are ordered to appear before an emergency session of the Council. This matter cannot wait. You will travel to Haven's Rest Station immediately. This is not a request." The message ended, and Jake stared at the blank screen. Tony was scratching his head and looking confused. "Boss, what could they possibly want with us? We just haul mining equipment and food supplies. We're nobody special." Jake was thinking the same thing. His ship was old and slow. His crew was just him and Tony. They had never been in trouble with any government, human or alien. They paid their taxes and delivered their cargo on time. Jake could not think of any reason why the most powerful organization in the galaxy would want to talk to him. "Maybe they got the wrong Jake Morrison," Tony suggested. "There must be hundreds of guys with that name." But Jake knew that was not true. The message had included the registration number of his ship. They knew exactly who they were looking for. Jake looked at the star charts and found Haven's Rest Station. It was deep in Council space, further from Earth than Jake had ever traveled. The trip would take 2 weeks, even if they pushed the engines hard. "We don't have much choice," Jake told Tony. "When the Galactic Council calls, you go. Start plotting a course to Haven's Rest, and send a message back to Earth Command. They need to know where we're going." As Tony worked on the navigation, Jake went back to his small cabin and packed a bag. He had no idea how long he would be away from his ship. He also had no idea what the Council wanted, but the alien's tone had been very serious. Something big was happening, and somehow Jake was part of it. The Silver Dawn left Jupiter's orbit and headed toward the edge of human space. Jake had never seen his ship move so fast. Tony had pushed the engines to their maximum safe speed. They passed several Earth patrol ships, but none of them tried to stop or contact them. Word about their mission had already spread. During the long trip, Jake spent his time reading everything he could find about the Galactic Council. The organization was older than human civilization. It included races that could read minds, others that could live for thousands of years, and some that could build machines the size of planets. Humans were considered young and primitive by Council standards. Jake also read about Haven's Rest Station. It was a massive structure built in neutral space, where all the alien races could meet safely. The station was larger than most cities on Earth. It had artificial gravity and an atmosphere that could support hundreds of different species. Jake wondered if he would be able to breathe the air there. On the 10th day of their journey, Tony picked up radio signals from other ships, heading toward Haven's Rest. The signals were in alien languages that their computer could not translate. Whatever was happening, it was big enough to bring together ships from all over the galaxy. "You nervous?" Tony asked as they approached the Council space border. Jake looked out at the stars ahead. Terrified, he admitted, but curious too. This might be the most important thing that ever happened to a human. The Silver Dawn crossed into Council space and headed toward whatever was waiting for them at Haven's Rest Station. Haven's Rest Station was unlike anything Jake had ever imagined. The structure stretched across space like a giant metal flower with petals that served as docking bays. Each petal was large enough to hold 1,000 ships. Jake counted at least 20 petals, and all of them were full of vessels from different alien races. Tony guided the Silver Dawn toward the docking bay assigned to them by traffic control. The bay was enormous, and their small cargo ship looked like a toy next to the alien vessels already docked there. Some ships were sleek and silver like liquid metal. Others were covered in spikes and looked like they were built for war. A few ships seemed to be made of crystal that glowed with inner light. "Look at that one!" Tony pointed to a ship that looked like a living creature. Its hull moved and rippled like skin, and Jake could swear he saw it breathing. Two aliens in environmental suits met them at the airlock. One was tall and thin with blue skin and 4 arms. The other looked like a walking tree with bark for skin and leaves growing from its head. They both carried devices that Jake assumed were translators. "Human Morrison," the blue alien said through its translator. "I am Guide Veltar. This is Guide Mokani. We will escort you to the council chamber. Your companion must remain with your vessel." Jake looked at Tony, who nodded. "I'll keep the ship ready," Tony said, "just in case we need to leave in a hurry." The aliens led Jake through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The station was even more impressive on the inside than it had looked from space. The ceilings were high enough to accommodate the tallest alien species, and the walls were covered with symbols from hundreds of different languages. Jake saw his first living aliens as they walked through the station. A group of creatures that looked like giant spiders with jeweled shells walked past without giving him a second glance. A being made entirely of light floated by overhead. Two aliens that looked like walking rocks argued in voices that sounded like grinding stone. "First time on Haven's Rest?" Guide Veltar asked. "First time meeting aliens," Jake admitted. Guide Mokani made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter. "Humans are still very young. Your species has much to learn about the galaxy." They entered a transport tube that carried them toward the center of the station. Through the transparent walls, Jake could see the council chamber ahead. It was a perfect sphere large enough to hold thousands of beings. The inside of the sphere was covered with platforms and seating areas arranged so that gravity seemed to work in all directions. "How does that work?" Jake asked, pointing at aliens who were sitting on what looked like the ceiling. "Artificial gravity generators," Guide Veltar explained. "Each section has its own gravitational field. Very old technology. Humans will learn to build such things in time. The transport tube delivered them to the human section of the council chamber. Jake was surprised to see that there was already a section designated for his species. It was much smaller than the areas assigned to other races, but it existed. A few other humans were already seated there, wearing the uniforms of Earth Diplomatic Service. One of the humans approached Jake. She was a middle-aged woman with short gray hair and intelligent eyes. "Captain Morrison, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Harper, Earth's chief representative to the Council. We've been expecting you." "Do you know why I'm here?" Jake asked. Dr. Harper shook her head. "Speaker Zeth Kalar requested you specifically, but he won't explain why. This emergency session was called only 3 days ago. Something has the entire council scared." Jake took a seat and looked around the chamber. He had never seen so many different forms of life in one place. There were aliens that looked like living metal, others that seemed to be made of gas or energy. Some were beautiful in an alien way, while others were terrifying to look at. All of them seemed much more advanced than humans. The chamber began to fill as more delegates arrived. Jake noticed that many of the alien races stayed in separate groups and did not mix with others. The tensions between some species were obvious even to a human who knew nothing about galactic politics. A low harmonic tone filled the chamber and all conversation stopped. Speaker Zeth Kalar appeared on a platform at the center of the sphere. The insect alien was even more imposing in person than he had been on the video message. His black shell gleamed under the lights, and his compound eyes seemed to see everything at once. "Fellow beings of the Council," Speaker Zeth Kalar began. His voice carried clearly throughout the chamber, even though he did not seem to be shouting. "We face a crisis unlike any in recorded history. The Void Swarm has returned." A wave of fear passed through the chamber. Jake could feel it, even though he did not understand what the Void Swarm was. Some aliens made sounds of distress while others began talking urgently among themselves. 3 star systems have gone dark in the past month, the speaker continued. Entire civilizations have vanished without a trace. Our combined fleets have engaged the swarm twice and suffered heavy losses both times. An alien that looked like a living suit of armor stood up. Its voice sounded like grinding metal. "Speaker, the Draknari fleet lost 20 dreadnoughts in the last battle. These creatures adapt to our weapons. Every attack we make only teaches them how to defend against it." Another alien, this one looking like it was made of flowing water, spoke next. "The ethereal mind touch has no effect on them. It is as if they have no consciousness at all, only hunger." Jake was starting to understand. Some kind of enemy was attacking the galaxy, and the most advanced races with their powerful weapons could not stop it. But that still did not explain why he was here. Speaker Zeth Kalar's compound eyes turned toward the human section. "Desperate times require desperate solutions. We have exhausted conventional warfare. Perhaps it is time to try something unconventional." The chamber filled with confused murmuring. An elegant alien with crystalline features stood up. Her voice was like wind chimes when she spoke. "Speaker Zeth Kalar, surely you cannot be serious. Humans have barely mastered space travel. What could they possibly offer that our combined wisdom cannot provide?" Laughter began to spread through the chamber. Jake felt his face grow hot as thousands of alien eyes turned toward him with amusement and contempt. The laughter in the council chamber grew louder and more cruel. Jake sat in his chair feeling smaller with each passing moment. Alien delegates pointed at him while making sounds that their translators rendered as mockery and amusement. He had never felt so out of place in his entire life. Dr. Harper leaned over and whispered in his ear, "Don't let them get to you. Sometimes being underestimated is an advantage." Speaker Zeth Kalar raised one of his sharp arms, and the laughter slowly died away. His compound eyes fixed on the crystalline alien who had spoken. "Lady Silandra of the Ethereal Collective, your psychic powers are legendary throughout the galaxy. Yet they had no effect whatsoever on the Void Swarm. The elegant alien's crystal features seemed to dim slightly. She sat back down without responding. The speaker turned toward the armored alien. "Commander Vaxhun of the Draknari Empire, your people have conquered half the galaxy with superior firepower, yet 20 of your finest warships were destroyed in a single engagement with the swarm." The metal warrior's armor plates shifted in what Jake assumed was shame. "The enemy learns from every battle, Speaker. By the end of the fight, they were immune to our plasma cannons and missile systems." "Exactly," Speaker Zeth Kalar clicked. "The Void Swarm adapts to any energy-based weapon system within minutes of first contact. They study our technology and develop countermeasures faster than we can develop new attacks. This is why all conventional warfare has failed." Jake was beginning to see where this was going, but it still seemed impossible. How could he and his cargo ship possibly help when the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy had already failed? Speaker Zeth Kalar's attention turned back to Jake. "Captain Morrison, please tell the council what cargo you carry in your vessel's hold." Jake stood up slowly, feeling the weight of thousands of years of galactic civilization staring down at him. His voice cracked slightly when he began to speak. "Honored delegates, my ship carries mining supplies for the colony worlds, mostly explosives for breaking up asteroids and clearing rock. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. An alien that looked like a giant octopus with fur spoke in a bubbling voice. Explosives? We possess weapons that can shatter entire planets. What possible use could your primitive chemical devices serve? Jake took a deep breath and tried to sound more confident than he felt. Because they're not energy weapons. The Void Swarm has learned to counter every form of energy-based attack you've used against them. But they've never encountered simple, chemical explosives. The confused chatter grew louder. Jake could see that most of the aliens did not understand what he was talking about. Their technology was so advanced that they had forgotten about basic chemical reactions. Dr. Harper stood up beside Jake. What Captain Morrison is suggesting is that we use weapons based on chemical reactions rather than energy manipulation. Gunpowder, dynamite, plastic explosives, technologies that human civilization perfected centuries ago. An alien that looked like a walking plant with flowers for a head spoke in a rustling voice. You speak of combustion-based weapons? Such primitive devices would be useless against swarm vessels. Their hulls can withstand direct hits from antimatter torpedoes. Jake felt his confidence returning. This was something he actually knew about. That's exactly the point. Their hulls are designed to adapt to energy weapons, but chemical explosives don't work the same way. When gunpowder explodes, it creates rapidly expanding gases and hurls metal fragments at high speed. There's no energy signature for them to analyze and counter. Speaker Zethkalar leaned forward with interest. Continue, Captain Morrison. Jake pulled out his personal communicator and activated a recording he had hoped he would never need to share. The image of Admiral Kane Fletcher appeared as a small hologram. The old soldier's scarred face was grim as he began to speak. Jake, if you're playing this message, then the Council is finally ready to listen to reason. 3 months ago, we had our first encounter with a Void Swarm scout ship in the Montana system. Tell them what happened there. The chamber fell completely silent. Jake could feel every alien in the room focusing on his words. A single swarm vessel appeared near the colony of New Helena. We had no military ships in the system, just converted mining vessels and whatever weapons the colonists could put together. Jake activated the tactical recording that Admiral Fletcher had given him. The main screen showed a sleek black ship moving through space like a predator. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, all smooth curves and flowing lines. The swarm ship destroyed. Our plasma defense batteries without even slowing down, Jake continued. It adapted to every energy weapon we fired at it. Particle beams, laser cannons, even an experimental ion torpedo. Nothing worked. The ship's hull seemed to learn from each attack and become immune to it. On the screen, the desperate colonists tried every weapon they had. Each attack was less effective than the last as the alien vessel adapted to their tactics. But one of the colonists, Danny Walsh, was an old mining engineer. He had experience with demolition work from the asteroid belt. Danny rigged up a cargo pod with 2 tons of industrial explosives, basic chemical compounds, nothing sophisticated by galactic standards. The recording showed a crude missile approaching the swarm vessel. It looked primitive compared to the sleek alien ship, just a metal cylinder with chemical rocket engines. The swarm's defensive systems ignored it completely, Jake said. Their sensors were designed to detect and counter energy weapons. They had no protocol for dealing with a simple chemical explosion. The missile struck the alien ship and detonated. The explosion was not elegant or precise like the energy weapons the aliens used. It was violent and chaotic, hurling fragments of metal and expanding gases in all directions. On the screen, the swarm vessel simply stopped moving. Its sleek hull was torn and blackened. Whatever intelligence had been guiding it was gone. The ship went completely dead, Jake said. No energy signature, no movement, no adaptation. Our boarding teams found that the explosion had destroyed the swarm's central processing unit. They couldn't adapt to something they didn't understand. The chamber was absolutely quiet. Lady Silandra was the first to speak, her crystal voice uncertain for the first time. You are suggesting that crude chemical weapons succeeded where our most advanced technology failed? Jake nodded. Sometimes the old ways work better than the new ones. Speaker Zethkalar called for a 30-minute recess, and the chamber began to empty as delegates gathered in small groups to discuss what they had just heard. Jake found himself surrounded by aliens who had been laughing at him just minutes earlier. Their attitudes had completely changed. Commander Vaxhun approached first, his massive armored form towering over Jake. The Draknari warrior's voice sounded like grinding metal when he spoke. Human Morrison, your species fights without honor. Chemical weapons are the tools of cowards and weaklings. Jake looked up at the alien warrior without backing down. Commander, my species fights to survive. Honor doesn't mean much when everyone you're trying to protect is dead. The alien's armor plates shifted in what Jake was learning to recognize as surprise. You speak with wisdom, small human. Perhaps there is more to your people than we believed. Dr. Harper appeared at Jake's side, carrying a data pad filled with information. Captain, I've been analyzing swarm technology for months. Your theory about their adaptation blindness makes perfect sense. They've evolved to counter energy-based weapons, but they have no experience with simple chemical reactions. An alien that looked like a walking tree with golden bark joined their conversation. I am Scholar Thane of the Mokari Collective. Our records show that chemical-based warfare was abandoned by most species thousands of years ago. It is considered primitive and inefficient. Inefficient against other advanced civilizations, Jake agreed. But the Void Swarm has never encountered it before. They have no defense protocols for chemical explosions because they've never needed them. Lady Salandra glided over on legs that seemed to be made of liquid crystal. Her voice was no longer mocking when she spoke. Captain Morrison, assuming your theory is correct, how much of these chemical weapons does your species possess? Jake thought about the question carefully. Earth's military had stockpiles of conventional weapons, but most of their arsenal was energy-based, following galactic standard technology. However, the mining colonies still used huge amounts of chemical explosives for industrial purposes. Earth itself has limited supplies, Jake admitted. But the mining colonies throughout, human space use chemical explosives every day. Asteroid mining, planetary excavation, construction work, we probably have more chemical explosives than any other species in the galaxy. Dr. Harper nodded in agreement. Human industrial capacity is built around chemical processes. We still use gunpowder, dynamite, plastic explosives, and dozens of other chemical compounds. What other species consider obsolete technology is still the backbone of human industry. The aliens exchanged looks that Jake couldn't interpret. Scholar Thane rustled his leaves thoughtfully. The irony is remarkable. What we saw as humanity's greatest weakness may actually be your greatest strength. Speaker Zethkalar returned to the chamber and called for order. The delegates took their seats quickly, eager to hear what would happen next. Jake noticed that none of the aliens were looking at him with amusement anymore. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to respect to barely contained hope. The council has voted to authorize a practical demonstration, the speaker announced. We have a captured Void Swarm fighter in the station's research bay. It will be subjected to both conventional weapons and Captain Morrison's chemical explosives. The results will determine humanity's role in this war. Jake felt his stomach drop. He had not expected to have to prove his theory so quickly. Speaker, I should mention that I'm not a weapons expert. I'm just a cargo pilot who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Nevertheless, you understand these weapons better than anyone else present, Speaker Zethkalar replied. Dr. Harper will assist you in preparing the demonstration. The entire council moved to the observation deck overlooking the research bay. Below them, Jake could see the captured swarm fighter held in place by energy fields. The alien vessel was about the size of his own ship, but its design was completely different. Where the Silver Dawn was functional and practical, the swarm fighter was organic and flowing, like it had been grown rather than built. The demonstration began with the Council's most advanced weapons. A Draknari plasma cannon fired first, its beam striking the swarm fighter's hull with tremendous force. Jake watched as the alien vessel's skin seemed to ripple and change, adapting to the energy signature of the weapon. When a second plasma blast hit the same spot, it did no damage at all. The pattern repeated with every weapon the Council tested. Particle beams, laser cannons, antimatter torpedoes, even exotic weapons that Jake had never heard of before. Each time, the swarm fighter adapted within seconds, becoming completely immune to further attacks of the same type. As you can see, Commander Vaxhun said grimly, "This is exactly what happened during our battles with the main swarm fleet. Every weapon becomes useless after the first hit." Now it was Jake's turn. Dr. Harper had helped him prepare a simple explosive device, using materials from his ship's cargo hold. It was nothing sophisticated, just plastic explosives wrapped around steel ball bearings and triggered by an old-fashioned timer. The kind of device that human miners had been using for decades. Jake activated the timer, and a robotic arm placed the bomb against the swarm fighter's hull. The explosive looked tiny and crude, compared to the elegant alien weapons that had just been tested. "Detonation in 10 seconds, Dr. Harper announced. Jake held his breath as the countdown reached 0. The explosion was violent and chaotic, completely, different from the precise energy beams of the alien weapons. Flames and smoke filled the research bay as steel fragments tore through the space where the bomb had been placed. When the smoke cleared, the swarm fighter was motionless. A large section of its hull had been torn away, revealing the complex machinery inside. Sparks flickered from damaged systems, and the organic-looking skin around the wound had turned black and lifeless. "Complete system shutdown," Dr. Harper reported, reading from her instruments. "The fighter's adaptive matrix has stopped functioning entirely." The observation deck was silent for a long moment. Then Commander Vaxhun began to laugh, a sound like grinding gears that somehow conveyed joy. By the warrior gods, it actually worked. The primitive weapon succeeded where our most advanced technology failed. Scholar Thane was examining the readings from his own instruments. Fascinating. The chemical explosion created molecular-level chaos that the swarm's adaptation systems could not process or counter. They literally do not know how to defend against such weapons. Lady Silandra turned to Jake with what he was learning to recognize as an alien expression of respect. "Captain Morrison, I owe you an apology. When I called your species primitive, I did not realize that sometimes primitive solutions are the most effective ones." Speaker Zethkalar's compound eyes were focused entirely on Jake. "Captain, how quickly can your people produce these chemical weapons in large quantities?" Jake thought about Earth's industrial capacity and the mining operations scattered throughout human space. "Give us the raw materials and we can start production immediately. Human factories have been making these things for centuries. It's what we do best." The council chamber had been transformed overnight. Where there had once been confusion and doubt, now there was urgent activity. Alien delegates who had barely acknowledged humanity's existence were now working closely with Dr. Harper to plan the largest military operation in galactic history. Jake found himself appointed as military liaison between Earth and the Galactic Council, a title that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. He was sitting in a strategy meeting with beings whose civilizations were older than human recorded history, and they were listening to every word he said. Commander Vaxhun spread a holographic star map across the table. Red zones marked the areas where void swarm forces had been detected. "The main fleet is here, moving toward the Centauri cluster. If they reach those populated systems, billions of lives will be lost." Lady Silandra studied the tactical display with her crystal eyes. "Our combined fleets can slow them down, but we cannot stop them with conventional weapons. How long before human forces can join the battle?" Jake activated his communicator and connected to Earth Command. Admiral Kane Fletcher's weathered face appeared on the screen, but this time he was smiling. "Jake, Good to see you, boy. Word of your council demonstration has reached every human colony in known space. We're mobilizing everything we've got. The holographic image of Fletcher was joined by images of other human commanders from across Earth's territory. Captain Lisa Santos from the Mars Defense Force, General Robert Hayes from the Europa Mining Consortium, and dozens of others. Jake had never seen so many human military leaders in one place. "Admiral, what's our current status?" Jake asked. Fletcher gestured to someone off-screen, and the display filled with data. "We've got 300 ships loaded with chemical weapons heading toward Council space. Everything from converted cargo haulers to purpose-built bombers. Most of them are carrying mining explosives, but we've also got military ordnance from Earth's strategic reserves." An alien that Jake hadn't met before joined the conversation. It looked like a living suit of golden armor with gems for eyes. "I am Strategist Zan of the Veltar Confederation. These human vessels, are they capable of engaging swarm fighters in direct combat?" Captain Santos answered before Jake could respond. "Our ships aren't pretty, and they're not fast, but they're tough. Human vessels are built to survive in hostile environments. We've been dealing with space debris, radiation storms, and equipment failures for decades. Our ships can take a beating and keep flying." Commander Vaxhun leaned forward with interest. "What about your pilots? Do they have combat experience?" General Hayes laughed grimly. "Most of our pilots are miners, cargo haulers, and colonists. They've been dodging asteroids and navigating through dangerous space for years. They know how to fly in situations that would terrify your average military pilot." Jake was proud of the human response, but he also knew they were facing an enemy unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. "Admiral, have our people been briefed on swarm tactics?" Dr. Harper activated another display showing detailed analysis of swarm behavior. "We've shared everything we know about the enemy. The swarm fights in coordinated swarms, hence the name. Individual fighters are not particularly dangerous, but they work together in groups of hundreds or thousands." Scholar Thane added his own observations. "Swarm vessels appear to share information instantaneously. What one learns, they all learn. This is why energy weapons become useless so quickly in battle." Jake studied the tactical data and saw the problem immediately. "So if we use chemical weapons against one part of the swarm, won't the rest of them adapt to counter our attacks?" "That is the critical question," Speaker Zethkalar admitted. "We believe that chemical reactions are too chaotic for the swarm to analyze and counter, but we cannot be certain until we test the theory in actual combat." Admiral Fletcher's image leaned closer to the camera. "Jake, there's something else you need to know. Word of the human solution has spread beyond our military. Civilian volunteers are retrofitting their own ships with whatever explosives they can find. Miners are loading up cargo holds with dynamite. Even passenger liners are being converted into bombers." Jake felt a mixture of pride and fear. Humanity was responding to the crisis with typical determination, but they were also rushing into a battle against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than Earth. Commander Vaxhun stood up and began pacing around the room. "The human fleet must coordinate with our existing forces. Draknari warriors will provide escort and cover fire while human bombers deliver their chemical payloads." Lady Silandra nodded in agreement. "Ethereal mind links will coordinate communications between all allied vessels. Even though we cannot affect swarm minds directly, we can ensure perfect coordination among our own forces." The strategy that emerged was unlike anything in the history of galactic warfare. Advanced alien warships would protect primitive human bombers as they delivered weapons that other civilizations had abandoned millennia ago. It was desperate and dangerous, but it was also the galaxy's only hope. Jake looked around the room at the assembled beings. Representatives of dozens of species who had been fighting and competing for thousands of years were now working together toward a common goal. Humanity had done more than provide weapons. They had given the galaxy something it had been missing for centuries: hope. "There's one more thing," Jake said. "Human military doctrine has always emphasized redundancy and backup plans. We never rely on a single weapon or tactic. If chemical explosives don't work as well as we hope, we have other ideas." Speaker Zethkalar's compound eyes focused on Jake with intense interest. "What other ideas?" Jake smiled for the first time since arriving at Haven's Rest. "Humans have been very creative about finding new ways to destroy things. We've had lots of practice." The meeting continued for hours as details were hammered out and contingencies planned. By the time it ended, Jake realized that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer the ignored newcomer to galactic civilization. They were now essential partners in the fight for survival. As the alien delegates filed out of the chamber, Dr. Harper approached Jake. "Captain, I hope you realize what you've accomplished here. You've changed the relationship between humanity and the rest of the galaxy forever." Jake nodded, but his mind was already focused on the battle ahead. In less than a week, human and alien forces would face the Void Swarm in the largest space battle in recorded history. The outcome would determine whether galactic civilization survived or fell to an enemy that had already consumed entire star systems. The Council had stopped, laughing at humanity, but now they had to prove that their faith in human ingenuity was justified. The combined fleet gathered at the edge of the Centauri cluster was the largest military force in galactic history. Jake stood on the bridge of the Silver Dawn and watched through the viewport as thousands of ships from dozens of species formed into battle formations. Sleek Draknari dreadnoughts moved alongside converted human cargo haulers. Ethereal crystal ships glowed next to Mokari bio-vessels that looked like living creatures. Tony Rodriguez was at the pilot's station, checking their systems for the 10th time in an hour. "Boss, I still can't believe we're doing this. 3 weeks ago, we were hauling mining equipment. Now we're about to fight aliens from beyond known space." Jake was checking the explosive charges they had loaded into modified missile tubes. The Silver Dawn was never meant to be a warship, but human engineers had worked around the clock to convert civilian vessels into bombers. "Sometimes life takes unexpected turns," Jake said. "The important thing is that we're here when people need us." Admiral Fletcher's voice came over the communication system, addressing the entire human fleet. "All ships, this is command. Long-range sensors show the Void Swarm main force approaching our position. Estimated time to contact is 30 minutes. Jake activated his own sensors and saw them on the display. The swarm fleet looked like a dark cloud moving through space, thousands of individual ships flying in perfect coordination. Each vessel was sleek and black, their hulls reflecting no light. They moved with predatory grace, like sharks circling their prey. Commander Vaxhun's voice joined the communication from his flagship. "All units maintain formation discipline. Do not engage the enemy until human bombers have delivered their payloads. Draknari forces will provide escort and cover fire." Lady Silandra added her own instructions from the ethereal command ship. "Mind link established between all allied vessels. Coordination will be perfect, even in the chaos of battle. Trust in your allies and fight with courage." Jake could feel the mental touch of the ethereal mind link connecting him to every other pilot in the fleet. It was a strange sensation, like having thousands of other minds brushing against his own thoughts. He could sense their fear, their determination, and their hope all mixed together. The Void Swarm reached weapons range, and the battle began immediately. The alien ships opened fire with energy weapons that Jake had never seen before. Beams of dark energy that seemed to absorb light rather than produce it cut through space toward the Allied fleet. The Draknari dreadnoughts returned fire with their plasma cannons, their shots lighting up the darkness between the fleets. But, just as Jake had expected, the swarm vessels began adapting to the energy weapons within minutes. Each successive hit did less damage than the one before. "All human bombers, "This is your moment," Admiral Fletcher announced. "Deliver your payloads and show these creatures what humanity can do." Jake pushed the Silver Dawn's engines to maximum power and dove toward the enemy formation. Around him, hundreds of other human ships did the same. They were not elegant or sophisticated like the alien warships, but they were tough and determined. The swarm fighters moved to intercept the human bombers, their dark hulls rippling as they adapted to defend against the energy weapons of the escort ships. But they ignored the primitive chemical weapons that the human ships carried. Their sensors could not detect any energy signature worth defending against. Jake's first target was a large swarm vessel that looked like a living creature made of black metal. He armed his chemical warheads and fired them at close range, then immediately turned away to avoid the explosion. The detonation was violent and chaotic, hurling fragments of steel and expanding gases in all directions. The swarm vessel's hull was torn open, and its organic-looking interior was exposed to space. The ship stopped moving and began to drift, completely dead. All around him, other human bombers were having the same success. Chemical explosives tore through swarm hulls that had easily resisted the most advanced energy weapons in the galaxy. The enemy's greatest strength, their ability to adapt, was useless against weapons they could not understand. But the swarm was learning in other ways. Jake watched as the enemy formation began to change, spreading out to minimize the damage from chemical explosions. They could not adapt to the weapons themselves, but they could adapt their tactics. "All ships, the enemy is changing formation," Commander Vaxhun reported. "Adjust your attack patterns accordingly." Jake smiled as he armed his second salvo of missiles. This was exactly what he had hoped would happen. The swarm was being forced to fight on human terms, using tactics and strategies that humanity had perfected through centuries of warfare. Captain Santos's voice came over the communication system from her position deeper in the battle. "Human ships, use spread formation. Don't let them concentrate their fire. Remember your mining experience and treat them like asteroids that shoot back." The battle continued for hours, with human bombers making repeated runs against swarm vessels, while alien escorts provided cover and support. Jake lost count of how many enemy ships he had destroyed, but he could see that the tide of battle was turning. The swarm fleet, which had seemed invincible just hours earlier, was being systematically destroyed by weapons that most civilizations considered obsolete. Chemical explosives and steel fragments were proving more effective than antimatter torpedoes and quantum disruptors. As the last swarm vessels were eliminated, Jake found himself floating in space surrounded by the debris of the greatest battle. In galactic history, human ships were damaged and battered, but they had won. The threat that had terrified advanced civilizations for months had been defeated by primitive weapons and determination. Speaker Zeth Kalar's voice came over the communication system, addressing the entire fleet. "To all beings who participated in this battle, you have saved galactic civilization itself. But special recognition must be given to humanity, whose primitive weapons and unconventional tactics made victory possible." Jake looked out at the Allied fleet and realized that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer the ignored newcomer to galactic society. They had proven themselves in the crucible of battle and earned the respect of civilizations thousands of years older than their own. Admiral Fletcher's final message to the human fleet was simple and direct. "All ships, mission accomplished. Let's go home." As the Silver Dawn turned toward Earth, Jake reflected on everything that had happened. The Council had laughed at humanity until they saw what humans brought to the fight. Now no one would ever laugh at human ingenuity again. In the end, it had not been superior technology or ancient wisdom that saved the galaxy, but the simple human ability to find new solutions to impossible problems.